Hello, this is Storytime with Aaron. I'm Aaron, and this is going to be the first discussion video. The topic is immigration. It's an important topic to discuss, especially here in the United States right now. Um, but the key point is that we all have the divine right to go where our intuition is guiding us to go, which brings me to the point of evolution. Now, evolution happens when the physical world works in tandem with the energetic world, and through experiences in that physical form, develops a more informed energetic body. The more informed the energetic body, the greater it can support the universe in its evolution. Now, human beings are going through an evolution, the earth is going through an evolution, the universe is going through an evolution. But everything in physical form is learning. The trees are learning, the rocks are learning, entire ecosystems are learning. Now, it does this through experiences and overcoming obstacles. Some of these obstacles are presented in your current incarnation and are based around your physical conditions or environment. Sometimes these hurdles are passed down through your ancestors, which means that they're more deep-seated. Now, we all understand the ego has some negative traits, things like arrogance and greed and fear. And fear is not always a bad thing. It's good to have a healthy amount of fear when it comes to survival in physical form. But the ego also helps us regulate how much stress that we're under. And the more source energy that we carry, the more connected we are to our higher self, the more we are pushed to expand or exercise our physical form around that intention. Now, the ego knows that it has to integrate this information bit by bit. It can't take on all of that at once because for every action there's a reaction. So ego understands the energetic pushback from intent. And so the point is to create new pathways when you're met with a situation that have a positive outcome, so the energy travels when the ego is trying to control your stress, and you take on a new amount of energy. If you have a positive pathway that this energy can travel down, you're not impacted in a negative way. You're not under as much stress. If you're presented with a new situation in your incarnation, it's easier to create a new pathway. If you get passed down a situation through your ancestors, the programming might be so deep that in order to alleviate the stress, your ego might want to release the energy down the pathway that it knows how to survive, but might not be the most beneficial pathway. So it's harder to create new programming just in general than it is to either react in kind or it's just in general it's harder to create a new pathway than be reactionary or resist following old programming. So what a conditional environmental three-dimensional physical hurdle might be in your current incarnation is something like touching a hot stove. Now, on a soul level, you probably understand that fire is hot. Um, we're weary or hesitant towards it. But in more specific instances, you haven't integrated that information through an experience. So touching a hot stove, you do it once, you understand don't do that. You do it twice, you understand that's right. I already touched the hot stove and realized that that's what happens when you touch it, so I better not do it again. You do it a third time and you start feeling a little silly about yourself. Now, humanity is going through, and by the way, if you overcome a hurdle that has very deep-seated old programming and you open up a new pathway to positive results, you can not only release yourself or unlock your own energy, but you can unlock the energy of your ancestors, freeing them of that restriction. So, so humanity has had its own hurdles to overcome, lessons to learn. And one of the lessons that we have not been able to overcome is the hoarding of abundance and controlling the flow of people and animals. Now, hoarding abundance is a result of fear. The intentions are good in the beginning. Oftentimes, we want to reduce the stress on our physical form, which is a positive thing. Things like getting a good night's sleep, sustainability as far as keeping yourself fed or having nutrients. But when we start worrying about not being able to acquire these things and relying too much on comfort or accessibility, we start behaving counterintuitively. And the more that we worry about not having what we need, the less source energy we are welcoming in or acting from, or able to acquire. And we are not, the more source energy you have, the more connected you are to your higher self. When you're operating through fear, source will limit the energy that you're working with. Therefore, you are not as connected to your intuition. So we start looking for, in order to make that state of mind more comfortable, we start looking for distractions or more comfort, more abundance, more sort of interdependence to convince ourselves that not being, explorative and not creating new experiences for ourselves, we need to alleviate the stress of not doing that, so we seek out more comfort or distractions from this stress to kind of counterbalance things, the false senses of security. Interdependence in a community has limitations as far as learning experiences go and the evolution of your soul. The less that we can hear our intuition, the more resistant we are to change. When you're presented with change, your intuition will tell you which direction you need to go or how to transmute it or alchemize it. Turn it into something positive. How it can help you expand your energy or create a more informed, energetic body. So the less we hear our intuition, the more resistant we are to change. The less open to change, the more we try to control. The more we start to oppress each other. Um, this all, the hoarding of abundance, this whole experience creates a stress point. Not only in our communities, but if large enough, can create a stress point for the planet. And if you think about having, a knot in your back, you want to relieve that tension. So, Source brings immigrants to reduce that tension. Um, Immigrants are not only following the call of their own soul and higher self, but they are answering the call of your soul and source. So, in essence, immigrants are healers, and you don't meet healers with violence. Um, Examples of hoarding abundance over time. Atlantis. Now, Atlantis is more, the stories are more focused on the technology, but if you can imagine, and also seem to be very abundant, but if you can imagine that much abundance and technology, you most likely they wanted to know the comings and the goings of the people in that civilization. But the isolation and development of that technology created a threat and a stress point to the planet, because this was not being exercised in a balanced way or being measured against the rest of the processes. Hey, Mattis, you okay? Not being measured against the flow of the planet or the surrounding civilizations. Just it wasn't being integrated, and therefore wasn't really having a sort of kind of field test on a micro level. It was becoming very macro. And it was it was becoming too big for its britches, in essence. But anyway, so another example, and Atlantis was destroyed, fell into the ocean. Egypt, another example, very focused on abundance, social hierarchy. From what we understand, Egypt was also built on the backs of slaves, which would be controlling people's evolution, in essence, blocking source, and creating a stress point for the planet. Babylon. Noah's descendants were meant to repopulate the planet, spread themselves out, but Babylon was created and became very focused on abundance, distractions, comfort. As far as we know, was started to become very oppressive. They got the message from a spiritual representative that the advice was to leave Babylon or leave its walls. And Babylon fell. Babylon was destroyed. Troy, another example, was known for having impenetrable walls. Was also known for its abundance. Most likely controlled the flow of people coming in and out, but in essence trapping that energy created a stress point, and we had the Trojan War, and Troy was destroyed. More modern examples of this are places like the United States and other first world countries. The hoarding of abundance is apparent. The United States also had slavery, and has in in ending slavery was headed towards the promise of everyone's divine rights and liberties. Nazi Germany also very focused on abundance, but more in the sense where the Nazis were focused on the occult and religious relics, and thought that they could establish some sort of power through mysticism, and in the genocide of the Jewish community, they were controlling the flow of people and their evolution. And not just controlling, but destroying altogether. So how this tends to start is through the delegitimization of a group of people. In the United States, we have a term many people use, which is illegals, or illegal immigrants. You deem someone illegal, you make them undesirable, unfit. And by the way, this can be done to any group of people. Once someone in power, or people in power, start propagating reasons to remove a member of its society, we start making excuses of why that is okay. And this also goes to this conversation about creating new pathways. If we've done it for so long throughout history, the more difficult, the more courageous thing would be to do is figure out a way that we can move forward without infringing on anyone's divine rights. But the arrogance wants to continue the old behavior to resist change. So, if we do not have a society that supports evolution, we will demonize anything that is disrupting these false senses of security. The delegitimization of animals looks like things like, well, we can eat this animal because of this, or we can exterminate this animal because of this reason. By the way, we do not need to eat animals to survive. There will be a lot of poking at that remark, but I did own a t-shirt at one point that said, I'll be a vegetarian when bacon grows on trees. So, there's no there. But in certain life-threatening situations, sometimes we are required to eat meat. Another example we could toy with is, before a long winter. If you live in an area that has a long winter, that requires a bit of fat storage. And if you have two, major feasts with your family, and there is meat provided, that, 2 animals before winter is something that a small family farm could provide. or could supply for its local community. In essence, we're going to be talking about all of that because overall, we need to give the animal kingdom a chance to recover itself. But I don't believe we'll ever be returning to eating meat 3 times a day, even once a week. Things like factory farms are going to be a thing of the past. So, and commercial fishing and all of these things. So, large farms, whether they be plant-based or providing this small bit of meat before winter for certain areas, let's say for conversation's sake, those larger farms need to be reduced to smaller farms and have their own owners or separate ownership that is not underneath an umbrella corporation. So less, well, no large farms, but more small farms and markets and things like this. Also, if there's more smaller markets available, it will be easier to go where you're being guided to go and feel like you can sustain yourself and not needing to stay near your local market. Okay. Anyway, those are conversations for down the road. But displacement of animals and people. When an animal or a person is moved against its will, it's not only stressing that individual, but it's also stressing subconsciously the person initiating that effort. It also stresses out the community that it's being removed from, and it stresses the community that it's being brought to. You can imagine if you're doing this on a large scale with people or animals, how much stress that is creating. It's being done at such an extensive, on such an extensive scale currently around the world that it is creating too much stress for the planet and for Source to be able to work with the planet and in essence work with us. So moving an animal or a person is only okay if it's done for medical purposes, life-saving purposes like bringing an animal to a sanctuary. When it comes to habitat restoration and the transportation of animals, we'll have to have further discussions about that. The way our road systems are disrupting the flow of animals. It is counterintuitive to drive 60 miles an hour through heavily dense wooded forest. We tell ourselves things like, well, if you hit a deer, it not only hurts the deer, but it hurts, it could kill you. And so you think you're acting from self-preservation. These are excuses that we give ourselves when it is in clear conflict with the natural world. If it takes 4 hours to drive to Aunt Becky's, and we reduce the speed limit to 30 miles an hour so you can stop for an animal, potentially, and it's going to take 8 hours to get to Aunt Becky's house, then either the family needs to move closer to Aunt Becky or Aunt Becky needs to move closer to the family. It's things like this that we need to look at. Also, horses, the nature of the animal. Horses are meant to be free. And if horses cannot roam the planet for fear of being struck by a vehicle, then we need to change the way that we travel. How this might look is having things like road bridges, and I'm not talking every 20 miles, I'm talking every 5 miles to start, and then working our way to every mile. Will we have fences in between each road bridge? Possibly. Ideally, no. The point is to not control the flow of people or animals. But until we get this right, until we figure out how much they're using the animal bridges, which there's been research and animals do use these bridges, but what that actually looks like, we can talk about what we need to do in terms of prevention. But that still doesn't mean that we're going to necessarily have the speed limits that we have today on these major highways. That will reduce the amount of goods that are moving on these road systems, but that needs a major adjustment. So these are all conversations that we're going to be having. But if we're changing the financial system, no one, through this entire process, we're all going to have to make sacrifices, but no one is going to be impacted in a negative way. That is all perception. We also need to have increased penalties for hitting an animal. The fact that we can drive around and hit a raccoon or hit a squirrel and not be held accountable for it, and are still operating counterintuitively is reckless. So we need accountability there. So when it comes to the migration of animals, or just the flow of animals, land ownership comes into this conversation. We need to talk about the fact that owning land is an illusion. This planet belongs to itself. I wouldn't even say that it belongs to Source. I think it has its own divine, liberties and right to exist and evolve just like the rest of us. But we are a product of Source, and it needs to be revered in that way. And you give back to what gives to you. So we have a natural kinship and responsibility around how we help support how we support the universe, or supporting the universe. Now, property size, because of the amount of human beings that are on the planet, needs to be limited. And again, if people's property sizes are reducing, there needs to be some sort of compensation around that. We also need to limit how much property or acreage is owned, and need to match that amount with a piece of land that is not just free for the animals and open to the animals, but there needs to be a number. The acreage has to be matched for the animal kingdom. Let's say you have 20 acres of land, and some of it has houses, some of it doesn't, some of it has markets and whatever. There needs to be 20 acres next to that populated acreage for the animals to be able to travel and do what they need to do. And this land is not going to be owned by the country that it is in. It will not have any ownership whatsoever, because ownership is oppressive. These animals and Gaia need to be freed. We need to release the chains and allow them the space to do what they need to do. But they will need some level of management. We are here to work in tandem with the planet, to help the planet. So having a presence of certain specialists to maintain, and I'm not talking about uh, uh, um, excessive monitor, excessive management. Um, Talking about just keeping an eye on things, making sure that uh, that the planet is thriving, and not and but still, how can we be the judge of certain processes that are happening in the animal world and things like this? We have specialists and a lot of knowledge, where we can have the discussion around how that land should be managed. Okay. um, will there be any visitation by human beings other than these specialists? Not sure. If there is, it would be in designated areas, very few designated areas. Um, and it would have limited visitation. So the details around that, again, can be discussed down the road. Um, Property ownership should also, or land ownership should also be um, in favor of or work in tandem with the migratory paths of the animals on that land. Should not disrupt those migratory paths. Just looking at my phone beeping over there. Also, these animals on this territory, and in general, are not to be herded or controlled. But in essence, cows and horses should all be able to traverse this land. The example I would use is the United States, as they see fit. There's not going to be any ownership over these animals. They will be free. And again, if there's a medical need but not a oppressive kind of uh, monitoring of these situations, if there's medical assistance that can be provided in certain situations, or a way to help the habitat, we can have discussions on what's appropriate and what's not. Human beings, they like to get their hands in everything, and we get very excessive about it. But I don't think we're at that place anymore where we can let things just kind of fall apart, because of how much we've contributed to the just demoralization of our society and the animal kingdom overall. So a lot of us see these videos, and the animals are starting to help each other. Even predator and prey. There was that video about the shark that brought the turtle over to the boat, and I can't remember what was wrong with the turtle, but I think the turtle was in some sort of distress or something. But the animals are evolving as well as human beings, and so there's naturally, when the vibration is elevating on the planet, there's going to be more interaction between humans and animals, and we need to have it done in a way that's ethical, and responsible, and that we're not doing counterintuitive things just so we can arrogantly do what we want to do and not be disrupted by the animal kingdom. So anyway, Now, we've discussed impeding, the migration of animals and controlling the lives of animals and things like this. We're going to go back to people here and just talk about borders. So, and borders, that does reference the animal situation with, the fences and things like this, on the roads and stuff, and just the fences around property and things. But when it comes to people, there's conversations in America around building a wall. We started to make headway with the destruction of the Berlin Wall. But again, this would be going back down an old pathway. This would be another Troy, another Babylon. One of the stressful parts of where we've gotten ourselves to is the contrast of the lifestyles on either side of a border. This promotes tension, it promotes confusion. And, well, borders essentially should only be used for mapping purposes, to know what territory that you're in, not to control the flow of people. And this country was founded on a religion that has a phrasing, love thy neighbor. And Mexico is our neighbor. The people living in a border town or border state are more hard-pressed about maintaining their way of life because of the amount of pressure on the other side than anybody else in this country. And these are the people that are going to, whose communities are going to be changing the most. And so they are going to be the heroes of this part of the story. They are going to be the grace givers, and we need to support them, not only financially, but just with energy and acts of service and things like this. Physical acts of service. We're not resistant, and which means, in essence, that when these towns change, it's not about welcoming people into towns in the United States or other first world countries and having those people live the way those countries live. It's about blending the border, blending the communities, so we are learning from them, they are learning from us. More languages being spoken, different restaurants, popping up. Just having a fair exchange of ideas. There are things that first world countries have been able to accomplish that create certain comforts that are beneficial to our lives. And there are things that countries outside of these first world countries do, like supporting their elderly. Instead of sending their elderly to an old folks home, they keep them close to their family until the end of their years. And so it's concepts like this, when you blend the border, when you blend these communities, you take away that tension and you just start building in the right way. But it's not so much that we're resistant to differences, we're resistant to change. And if you grew up in the 50s in America, and you are used to having, a milkshake, and you want your grandchildren to be able to have a milkshake, it's not so much the milk that we're attached to. If in the 50s you grew up drinking almond milkshakes, and that was the norm, and all of a sudden in 2025 they want to take away all the almonds, and your grandchildren are left without being able to taste an almond milkshake, that would be more devastating. And so it's not so much the it's not so much what we've gotten used to, or it's not so much uh, the means in which we have what we're used to. It's more resistance to changing what we're used to. So when it comes to blending the borders, people mention, there's a lot of that going on in the world right now, but we're going to make it through. Hopefully everybody's okay. When it comes to welcoming people into a country, people worry about the financial aspect of things. Now, we will be changing the concept of money. We have no choice. But other than being willing to have our communities change, we need to be okay with our classroom looking differently, with having a resident, having people pass through our communities for 2 weeks at a time or 4 months at a time. Change is not what hurts us. It's not having a baseline globally, which locally will be expressed different or experienced differently. But if we don't have kind of this global baseline of peace and divinity and understanding our sovereign rights as souls or individuals, we don't have the flexibility locally. So when we change our priorities around developing a society around our soul's evolution, or just evolution in general, it's easier to accept change. We do have the room. We do have the means to do it. We just feel limited because of our thinking. But as far as worry around, any nefarious groups, people, or activities, now the motivations around nefarious groups could be from a few things. Perhaps it's money, perhaps it's control or land ownership, or land, regional dominance. A lot of it is, regional protection, people trying to protect the area that they're from. When you are up against or exist next to a city of abundance, or that hoards its abundance, that's developed itself to such a degree where you feel like you could be overrun by that system, you find ways to be able to establish yourself. I am not making excuses for bad behavior. If anyone is inflicting physical or mental abuse on anybody, it should be met in kind, with the same amount of energy, but in a diplomatic way. But it's hard to point the finger, because in these cities of abundance, we've created so much stress for each other and the planet, and have constricted our existence so much that someone who is a part of a nefarious group is acting against themselves and the community and against Source, but perhaps is not creating overall as much stress for the planet. And so, again, I'm not making bad behavior okay, but it's very difficult to point the finger and try to find the bad guy. So the point is that we all need to come to an understanding that we're going to work together to blend our communities to make sure everybody's family and friends and neighbors are safe. Um, this means that when we have this sort of kind of global accountability system, this global stabilization, and we move that to more local stabilization, these areas will no longer be owned by corporate entities, personal empires, nefarious groups. This land will be managed by its people through their government. Their government. There's not going to be any hidden intent or entity guiding this government. It will be the people's government. No hidden agendas, full transparency. But again, regardless of where you come from, if you come from a nefarious group, or if you come from a certain corporation or a certain entity with hidden agendas, whatever it is, you get a fresh start. If you have the skills to be able to participate for the betterment of everybody, then we need you. So we're going to have to be forgiving. We are going to have to, this is going to take patience and trust and love. There will need to be agreements drawn between these groups and their people, whether it be a corporation, nefarious group, etc., that they will not be acting against the intentions moving forward. So against this coming together, or this realignment, or this state of peace, or global understanding, or however we want to verbalize it. I'm sure there's a lot of great terminology, but I don't have the time to touch on it right now. But anyway, overall, I said the agreements will be made in cooperation of the realignment and blending of communities. The less cooperation from everybody, the more time we waste. It's time for peace and relief, frankly. So the global accountability system, can look like just a baseline for safety and stability. There could be something like a record for everyone globally, which will be managed by the people, and everything will be handled in a diplomatic, compassionate way, but also met in kind to the type of infraction it poses against the community. But if there haven't been any serious infractions, you should be able to go where you're intuitively guided to go, which will make us more comfortable when we see someone new in our community. We won't need to know every single thing about that person, how long they're planning on staying. Some people are guided to, let's say someone from South America is guided to go to Canada. And then they passing through America, and their intuition says, okay, stop here. And they don't know how long they're supposed to stop there or stay there. We should have a system where they don't have to pass through if they're being guided to go elsewhere, because the initial guide towards Canada could have been to get them to the breadcrumbs they're following could be to get them wherever they landed. So, following your intuition is a personal experience for every single person. And we shouldn't have to invade people's personal space to figure out exactly what they're all about and where they're going. We should create some sort of system of trust. Perhaps they're being called to a space because they have certain talents as a soul, and it will help them when they go to this place develop those talents and skills, and then their intuition will guide them where to go and use those skills. If we can unlock that and have all of us go where we're being guided to go, we could end up in a very, very good way. And in turn, the more intuitively we're living, of course, the more the planet will benefit and the animals will benefit and all of these things. We need to have a global fund for immigrants, the homeless, the elderly, children, animals, and the disabled. Land ownership needs to go to indigenous people in their homelands. Again, most animals and human beings migrate at some point, but to restore the spirit, there's been major oppression that has happened to certain groups, especially here in the United States, but around the world, and we need to balance that out before we move forward. This is about starting fresh, starting new, but there are some things we need to do to elevate just the spirit of us as a global community altogether. Indigenous peoples also need to have, and by the way, we're all from everywhere at this point. There are just some things that we need to do to honor the spirit of certain groups of people. But positions of government need to be given to indigenous peoples in local and global government, because their relationship to the planet, Gaia, they are friends of the earth. We are all supposed to be friends of the earth, but especially indigenous peoples, and we really need their guidance on how to establish a stronger relationship with the planet. I will say that there are some things that humanity has done throughout history, whether it's a current civilization or indigenous civilization, in regards to the treatment of animals, that were not supposed to be a part of the permanent fabric of humanity, but have just kind of been allowed or made, we've made excuses for these things over time. And so those things need to be discussed. Like the wearing of animals and things like this, whether it's for, spiritual expression or, because you want a new leather jacket. These things, some things are not just a problem from certain civilizations. Some things are just a basic human problem. So we need to address that. We need to do better at integrating our communities. Like, for example, the black community with the white community. There are other racial groups. I grew up in America, so that's the one that's most predominant. But there are other racial groups that could do better in blending with each other. We need to open ourselves up. Source wants us to play, wants us to create these new pathways. Source wants to know how it can express itself. The more it learns, the better it does. Now, we also need to end, child labor, forced labor, slave labor. We need to have some sort of global fund and for people involved in these practices, because they still want to be able to work or earn some sort of income. We need a productivity shift overall. This is going to be a big, a huge era of think tanks, but we got it. We can do it. Also, we need to have better sanctuaries for the homeless until we integrate these members back into our society. And by the way, we're not integrating anyone back into a society by saying, well, we're going to build you up so you can live this way, so you can live counterintuitively. These people oftentimes have returned to a more natural state as a human being, and we need to protect that to a degree. There's that. The immigrants and the homeless, in essence, are helping source more than these cities of abundance. So they should be prioritized. Children in their purity of instinct and intuition should also be prioritized and encouraged to go where they're feeling guided to go, of course, with the safety and guidance from their parents. We need to actively change the financial system around immigration, and just actively change the financial system in general. As long as we are progressing, we are going to be in alignment. On a more personal note, on a dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, the warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. There she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell. I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle. She showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say, welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place. Such a lovely face. There's plenty of room at the Hotel California. Any time of year, you can find me here. I have been fortunate enough to call Los Angeles home for about the last 20 years. One of the most beautiful things about this city is its immigrants. We have the largest population of Mexican people, second to Mexico City in Mexico. And we consider everybody that lives there a resident and family. The removal of any of these people is a direct threat to our culture, our happiness, and our prosperity. If you are a member of the California National Guard, my suggestion to you is listen to your intuition. If you feel like what you're doing isn't right, don't do it. Leaders follow their hearts. If you do this, you will not only benefit your own life, but you will be setting a positive example for your comrades in arms. To anyone involved with ICE, I understand the fear and the fire that's been stoked around this topic. Nobody is going to be held to the position that they currently have. This is an opportunity for everybody to start over, to move forward in the right direction. Regardless of who you are, you have Source, you have the spirit world, and you have the planet encouraging this positive, divine right action. To any immigrants that might be scared, I love you. Regardless of everything that's unfolding, you are protected, and this will be resolved. Have grace for yourself and have grace for others that don't understand how to love. We will make it through this moment as a global family, as a human family. I love you all so much, and I look forward to the future videos and further discussions around important topics. Thank you very much.